Welcome and Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Thank you. And here we are. Hopefully you will see it in a moment. And this chapter 15, is called Brit Bein HaBetarim, the covenant between the pieces. It is an extremely significant chapter in Genesis and in the covenant that God makes with Abraham and his descendants, as we will see. And it's a very mystical chapter, and we just started off, right, with God reassuring Abram at this particular point, that he is going to have children himself. And of course, both he and Sarah are quite advanced in years. So, Vayotze oto hachutza, and this is God, brought Abram outside. Vayomer, and he said to Abram, Habetna hashamayma, look now towards the heavens, or please look towards the heavens, usfor hakochavim, and count the stars. Im tuchal lispor otam, if you're able to count them. Vayomer lo, and again, this is God speaking to Abram, ko yezarecha, thus will be your seed. Your seed, your descendants will be as numerous as the stars in the heavens. Rashi. Yivayotze oto hachutza, he brought him outside. Lefi pshuto, according to the simple meaning of this verse, hotziu me'oholo lachutz, he took him out of his tent outside, lirot hakochavim, to see the stars, ulefi, and that's it. That's what it seems to say, right? Ulefi midrasho, however, according to a midrashic interpretation of the significance of taking out and things like that, Amarlo, God said to him, say mi'itztagninut shelcha, go outside of your astrological calculations. Remember, Abram came from Babylonia, and the Babylonians were very significant in developing astrology and that particular branch of knowledge, which to this day, of course, is something that very much influences Far Eastern cultures like India and China, etc., where they feel there is a connection between human beings and the heavens. So, go out of your astrological calculations, shira'ita b'mazalot, which you saw in the zodiac, we could say, right, in the stars, she'encha atid lahamid ben, that you in the future will not raise a son. So astrologically, your fate is not to raise a son. And there is a little trick here. Abram ein lo ben. Abram doesn't have a son. Aval Avraham, but Abraham yesh lo ben, will in fact have a son. So part of those calculations have to do with the person's name, right? There's actually a Latin phrase, nomen omen, that your name has significance in terms of your future. I can see some validity in that for sure. In Hebrew, we say, keshmo kainhu, as his name, so is he. So that's a midrashic interpretation when he says, go look at the heavens and count the stars, meaning astrological calculations. V'chein Sarai, and likewise, Sarai, that's her name at this point, lo teled, she is not capable of giving birth. Aval Sarah, but Sarah, her name's going to be changed, teled, she will in fact give birth. Ani koreh lachem shem acher, I am going to call you a different name, vayishtane hamazal, and the mazal, right, the horoscope will change, or the davar acher, another interpretation. Hotzio mechalalo shel olam. He took him out of the space of the world, the cavity of this world space. Higbi'u lamala min hakochavim, and he raised him above the stars. Vezel lashon habata, and that comes out of the implication, the connotation of the word when he says habet, look, because habata milmala lamata, to habet is to look downwards, from above to below. So again, there's sort of a lot of associations that you can have about this. So it's interesting, and it sort of backs up what I have said about our attitude towards astrology, etc., in that at least according to this text, we put some validity towards astrology, but the difference is we don't say that our fate is sealed by it. It may have a great influence, but nevertheless, God is greater than anything that's simply of a natural order. So when it says he took him out of the Chalalosh shel Olam, right, the space of the universe, we're talking about something transcendent. In other words, God put Abraham into a transcendent zone, we could say. So, pretty, as I said, mystical. Ve'emin b'Hashem, and he trusted God. Vayachshavehu lo tzedakah, and he attributed to him, that is God, attributed to him, is one way to look at it, right? As righteousness. In other words, that this was indeed a righteous act on Abram's part to trust God under such adverse situation as he was in, because we know that not having a child bothered him tremendously. And later on, in the next Sedra of Vayera, we will see why it was that Abram wanted to have a child so badly. Rashi, Ve'emin b'Hashem, and he trusted, he believed God. Lo sha'alo, he didn't ask God for a sign. In other words, he totally trusted God. He believed this was in fact going to happen. Also regarding this, aval Yerushat haaretz, but when it came to the possession of the land, sha'al Lord, he asked him for a sign. Va'amar lo bame eda, and he said to him, Abram said to God, how will I know this? Vayech shaveh, excuse me, Lord Staka. He attributed to him righteousness. Right, let's take a look at the Rashi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the question is, was it Abram who saw God as being righteous? Right, is that what it means? Actually, we flip it, and we say that the subject of Vayachshaveha is God, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, Chashva la'Avraham. He thought of it, or he attributed to Avram, Lizchut, as merit, for merit. He gave him credit for it, Velitzdaka, and as an act of righteousness, al ha'emunah she'emin bo, regarding the faith with which he trusted him, the faith that Abram had in God. It's interesting, right? That, yeah, Golda, hi.
Hi. Okay. So I'm going off from this. Abram is Ishmael's father. Abraham
Yes.
is Isaac's father.
That point is not made.
You know what? Because it should have been a long time ago. Like, take your son, your only son.
Yes, I understand. Right. It's true. And you know that Abram had a whole bunch of more children afterwards. After Sarah
Yeah,
died, he had, and those were children of
of
Abraham.
Abraham. Absolutely, absolutely. I'm just
So
just
they
saying. So
are
there's a not equal.
right.
It's different. They are different.
So
Absolutely
they
different.
are in the sense that God makes these promises to Abraham's seed and doesn't, we'll have to see if he includes Sarah in that regard, okay? And
Right.
and it's given me, as I've read this Parsha in my own preparations, it's given me a lot of, I've thought a lot about in terms of the land of Israel, right? It's true, though. I mean, other areas are given to other children of Abraham, but being a child of Abraham also has a lot to do with your beliefs. In other words,
Yeah.
in validating and living and making God your Elohim, right? That's the point.
Hmm.
So
Oh,
you
also something. I'm sorry. Something from yesterday that
yes,
I remembered when I was trying to fall asleep.
yes.
Uh, since this is before Ishmael's birth, so he's in his late 70s then,
No,
and
no,
not
no, no,
90,
no, no.
or early or 80s rather, and not 99 because we've got to go 13 years until Isaac's born,
Correct, correct. So we've already,
unless we're not linear. So
no, no, no. We've already talked about, right, the removal of Hagar happens already. Ishmael is born shortly afterwards. But remember, we talk about how he takes Hagar, how Sarah takes Abram, talks Sarah or Sarai talks to Abram and says, "Here, I'm not able to give birth." We already read that chapter. Okay, and so Ishmael is already born.
yeah.
We will see that he is already born.
No, that's coming up in
So
16.
so yeah, at this particular point, Abram's like 99.
Okay.
He's going to be 100 years old when Ishmael is born. But what the point, though, that I was
Okay.
trying to make is that, according to rabbinic tradition, the Muslims, and the Arabs are descendants of Ishmael as they hold themselves, right? And Christians are seen as descendants of Esau. But Esau's also a relative, and Esau is also a descendant of Abraham,
Correct.
for sure. I mean, yes,
Okay.
through Isaac.
Yeah, I'm getting lost in linear. Sorry.
Right. Well, because we break it up so much, it's
Right.
years since we discussed some of these things.
Right.
At any rate, but
Exactly.
I mean, to bring that point home, I'm trying, of course, to think of how we ever resolve these issues within the land of Israel and its possession, which have plagued us and plagued us and plagued us over the millennia, and whether or not, in fact, we can find seeds within the Bible to allow us to share that area a little more than we're doing right now, and not to, even from a religious point of view, although I know I would not convince anyone, who holds an Orthodox position. I know I wouldn't anticipate it. At any rate, let's
Okay. It's
get,
just my, brain is doing what my brain does.
that's all right. We love
Okay.
it. And we
All
love
right.
you for it, Golda.
Thank you.
Okay. Davar acher, another interpretation. Bame eda lo sha'alo ot. Okay, so what do we mean bame eda? How will I know? Right, it's over here. Here's the bame eda, right? Uh, Lo sha'al lo'ot. He did not, when he said, "How will I know?" He wasn't asking him for a sign, Ella amar lefanav, but what he was saying before him, that is, what is Abram was saying before God. Hodi enu be'eza zechut, let me know through what merit yekaimu ba, right? They will in fact accomplish it. This is talking here about the land, right? The land of Canaan. How will they be able to establish their right to the land? Look at this. Amar lo HaKodesh Baruch Hu, said the Holy One, blessed be He, B'zchut HaKorbanot, through the merit of the sacrifices. And I happened to be studying of the tractates of Achim and Menachot. It's a part of the Mishnah that deals with sacrifices, and there's a discussion as to, what exactly is the significance of the sacrifices, and of course, karev means to draw near, right? And the idea of the animal sacrifices as symbolizing our relationship to God, and the degree to which our lives are connected to the divine. And that when we talk about sin offerings, for example, the idea is that the animal is a substitute for ourselves, realizing to what degree, when we commit sins, the way in which our own lives then become suspect, or I can't think of the right word right now, but the fact is that in a sense our lives are no longer valid when we sin against our Creator. There's such a lack of gratitude and appreciation when we choose to sin against God. I mean, and there are degrees of sin, etc., etc. But we will get into this in just a little bit, and the way in which the sacrifices operate. Now, we also know that there's also thanksgiving offerings, not just sin offerings, but also offerings of appreciation and thanksgiving. And again, the idea of wanting to give God the greatest thing we can give, which is ourselves, as an act of gratitude. So I'm just skirting the surface of the significance of this particular comment on the part of Rashi. But I think in this case, for a sacrifice to be valid, it requires a person to be 100% sincere about what they're trying to express physically through the sacrifices. And it's talking about a level of behavior and thought, because intention is one of the first things they start discussing in Masechet Zvachim. Is was the sacrifice done with the proper intention? And there are various levels of intention that are involved in this, that have to be accomplished in order for the sacrifice to be valid. So, big subject. So, going back, here we go into the next sentence. Vayomer elav, and he said to Abram, Ani Hashem, I am Hashem, Asher Hotzeiticha, who brought you out. Sorry, just trying to get the page up. Me'ur Kastim, from Ur of the Chaldees, right, Mesopotamia. In order to give you et haaretz hazot l'rishta, this land, in order to inherit it. Okay, I think there's no Rashi on this. No, we got a bunch to go here. Another verse as well. So here we have, right, very early on, the idea of the connection of the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, to this particular real estate. Vayomer Adonai Elohim. And he says, this is Abram now speaking, Adonai Elohim, my Lord God. Bama eda ki irashena. How will I know that I will inherit it? Again, interesting, right? The issue of the relationship of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is interesting. Going on. Vayomer elav, and he said to him, God says to Abram, Chali egla mishuleshet. Take for me Rashi is going to translate it differently from the way it's translated in some translations. So egla mishuleshet. So it's related to the word shalosh, which means 3. So some say a calf of 3 years, but Rashi is going to understand it as 3 calves, right? So we'll see. The A's Mishuleshet, and according to Rashi, 3 goats, the ayil mishulash, and 3 rams, the tor and a dove, the gozal and a young bird. So now again, we are talking about animals, and you're going to see that the animals are very significant here in answering the question that Abram posed, and how this fits perfectly with how Rashi chose, how Rashi explained it, that it was by through the merit of the sacrifices. So, Eglah Meshuleshet, right? Bereshit Rabbah, according to Bereshit Rabbah. I apologize if you're hearing my dog barking loudly. Anyway, I hope you're still able to hear me. He says Shlosha Agalim, actually 3 calves. Remez, an allusion, Shlosha Parim, to the 3 cows, literally, or 3 bulls, 3 bulls, Par Yom HaKippurim, the bull that was brought on Yom Kippur, Par He'elem Davar, and a bull that was brought in a case where the Sanhedrin missed some element of law and did not teach properly. It was something that was hidden from them, Shel Sibur, regarding Helem Davar Shel Sibur, meaning this whole concept, meaning a case where the entire community was represented by the Sanhedrin, that they didn't realize that a transgression had been made, right? The Eglah Arufa, and we're talking about the calf whose neck was broken. That is the calf that was brought in a case where a body was found outside a city and no one knew how this person was killed. And again, you think about why these particular offerings were important, and I'm sure that a lot of ink could be spilled in terms of why these 3 particular things and how it held up the level of righteousness of the people, that they deserved the land of Israel. Again, now the Eis Meshulashet, and a goat that was 3 goats. Remez, again, an allusion, the Seir Hanesa Bifnim. So this was the goat that was done on the inside. This would be within the blood that was sprinkled inside. And I believe we're talking here about a sin offering that was brought on the part of the Sanhedrin, or in fact, I believe the king, that if either of these people, the leaders of the community, committed a sin, they had to bring the blood of this particular goat into the sanctuary itself, whereas a regular sin offering, the blood was simply sprinkled on the altar outside, the bronze altar outside. Usirei musafim shamoed, and the goats of the additional offerings brought on the festivals. Useir chatat yechid, and also a goat regarding a sin offering of an individual. Again, these offerings declaring in a very profound kind of way that relationship that we have to our Creator. That when we talk about God being our Creator, it has a profound meaning for us. For Ayil Mishulash are 3 rams. Asham Vadai. This was a ram that was brought in a case of a guilt offering, that a person realized that they had transgressed and committed a transgression, right? The Asham Talui, and it's mentioned if a person wasn't aware of, I believe the situation is where he isn't certain as to the nature of what he has done and what he needs to bring. Okay, the kivsa shel chatat yechid, and we're talking about a of a individual sin offering of an individual. The tor, and this is a dove, the gozal, translated as a young bird by Safaria. Rashi says the gozal is Tor uven Yonah. So the Torah talks about a dove and a pigeon, right? So there were slight differences between these two kinds of birds. So that's what Rashi was saying. What significance the sacrifices had in terms of the relationship that the Jewish people had to possess the land of Israel or the land of Canaan. Okay. We'll take, I'll just do this. Let me stop here, actually, because there's a lot to be said about what's going to come up in a moment, as we'll see, as Abraham prepares to these animals for this covenant that he is going to experience and that God is going to make with him and his offspring. So let me put that up here. And if you have any comments before I stop the recording. Okay, I'm going to stop the share. Any thoughts before we stop the recording?
Yeah, God promised Abraham Israel. What about Ishmael and his tribe? Was he still in Israel then too? Also the Arabs.
So we realize that at that particular point, they're sent elsewhere. They have their own area at that particular point. All right. We'll have to come across it as we read about it. We read about how Abram he had Ishmael and he had other offspring too, other sons as well. I think he had 10, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had a total of 12 sons ultimately. And it talks about giving them gifts and sending them off. We also know that when it came to burying Abraham, Ishmael was there with Isaac. So there was a reconciliation that took place at that particular point, and I don't want to anticipate too much, or else it's there in Chaye Sarah, and we may have read it already. So I'm going to stop the recording here, and we'll hopefully pick us up tomorrow.